Well, goodness. Thor Love and Thunder certainly happened to all of us. We witnessed something that technically meets the definition of a movie, watched it unfold like a murder happening before our very eyes that we were powerless to stop. It certainly left me curious about the future of this character in the MCU, and thankfully that does open up a door for some room of excitement. With Chris Hemsworth apparently willing to play Thor as long as he is able, and perhaps a future beyond the limitations laid out so clearly in Love and Thunder, it's time to take a look at the character and what ideas could be better explored in film with him going forward. So these are my 10 ideas for a Thor movie I want to see. Number 10, Thor and Shang-Chi, Legend of the Iron Fist. First up is a story I feel is mostly about bringing a bunch of stuff together and consolidated within the MCU brand. Shang-Chi was a really fun movie with a lot of creative ideas, energy, and visuals to it. I feel like the next natural step for its franchise is to better marry some of its concepts with other elements already introduced in the MCU. While Shang could bring a lot of goodwill towards both the Thor franchise and even more so the Iron Fist franchise, which was basically ruined in the Netflix era. Season 2 of Iron Fist didn't leave things in a boring place though. We had a Colleen Wing wielding the power of the Iron Fist contained in her sword, while Danny Rand is running around using Iron Fist bullets. There's some neat ideas here, and a lot of good stuff on the table that a competent team could really make into something good. I also find it interesting Shang-Chi introduces us to these elements of a hidden mystical realm on Earth, all while Kunlun was also apparently out there, destroyed according to the Netflix show, but still evoking a very similar theme of a hidden history within the Eastern world. None of these Iron Fist ideas have been touched on or explored for years within the MCU, but there's still so much potential to them. I would love to see Shang-Chi teaming up with a Thor now navigating the life of a single father as he and Love come on a visit to Earth. Them working with a Colleen Wing Iron Fist to deal with a threat, possibly Fin Fang Foom, but dragons of some kind seem most certainly like they should be included on some level. Well, this all sounds collectively like a pretty great movie to me. Better yet, the creative forces behind Shang-Chi I feel are the perfect candidates to sort of rehabilitate Thor and Iron Fist. The director, cinematographer, composer, and many others that were behind the film of Shang-Chi feel excellent at balancing the tone of their more serious content with funny bits, and it could go a long way in evening out the Thor franchise post Love and Thunder. Better yet, this team has shown they can do things with the visual style more substantive than your average MCU movie. And as much as Thor could use that breath of life, it would be practically resurrecting the public image of Iron Fist. Number 9. Thor and Shazam. So a month back from when I'm recording this, Zachary Taylor, perhaps not all that seriously, suggested he would love to do a crossover with Thor. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how great that film could be. Sure, it would be a feat of legal negotiations and two studios cooperating on a level we really haven't seen in some time, but it is hardly without precedent in the world of comic books. And the more I pondered on what this movie would look like, the more excited I got. Thor and Shazam are different enough characters, I feel their dynamic would make for an interesting movie all on its own, while all the multiverse stuff in media lately would make such a crossover very simple to put together from a story perspective. What really has me interested is obviously you would want at least one villain from the two franchises, and from the DC side of things we have a very tempting offer in the form of Black Adam. This is a character who would be so cool as the main antagonist or source of conflict in the story. Teth Adam, a centuries-old being, could have a certain level of mutual respect and understanding with Thor that neither character would share with the much younger Shazam. That alone is why I think this would make such a compelling movie. It might be fun to throw in a Thor villain or some extra characters here and there, but I think the main focus really should be on this trio of Thor, Shazam, and Black Adam. It would be really fun as a movie, just exploring and feeling out how these characters relate to one another, like in the original Avengers movie. Would Thor respect Black Adam, but ultimately side against his more violent and autocratic ways? Or would Black Adam be more willing to hear someone like Thor out over Shazam, as this is another person who has led his people against great hardship? And Thor might command a certain level of respect that Teth Adam would never afford Shazam. Whether or not a movie like this is ever actually going to be made, whether that chance is realistic or anything like that, is another concern entirely. Because at its core, I just think it's such a fun idea worth talking about, thinking about, and exploring, because the more I think about it, the better the idea just seems to work. Number 8. Thor vs. Hulk. I realize a lot of this was very much explored in Thor Ragnarok and seems to be the general direction of the MCU Hulk going forward. But I would also argue that movie, and even what they have planned, leaves a lot of room for us to push things a little further. While not every idea on this list would make for a serious movie, I do feel as though both Thor and Hulk could really use and are very overdue for a darker, more intense film. These two in particular feel defanged by the MCU over time, even if it wasn't really anyone's individual intention behind the scenes. Thor has become almost entirely comedic relief to the detriment of pretty much all other concerns for his character by the time of Love and Thunder, while Hulk really hasn't gotten much better or gone on anything resembling a rampage in years. This concept pushes back on both fronts. What if the Hulk got out of control again and started becoming dangerous? What if, in response, the authorities tapped into Thor for help, with the specific directive that Thor, as one of the original Avengers, stands as good a chance as anyone to bring down the Hulk peacefully if such a thing is possible, but also has the power to back up potentially taking him down. This movie would explore those ideas a little bit, asking serious questions about what to do in regards to the Hulk if he indeed can't be controlled, opening up darker stories and opportunities for the character, and even potentially paving the way to the full-blown World War Hulk kind of story involving the Avengers that people are talking about more and more these days, and Marvel seems very much to be hinting at for future content. It's fun to think about as a sort of direction for the MCU to explore, either building up towards or post-Secret Wars, like many of the ideas on this list. As a plus side, it also practically begs for an appearance by She-Hulk or other Hulk-adjacent characters, who have also been announced recently, and that can always add a bit of excitement or throw in a couple of surprises along the way. We shall see. It certainly seems like the MCU has their own ideas for the Hulk already, but I do wonder if Thor's story and role in that isn't over quite yet. Number 7. Thor and Spider-Man vs. the Lizard. Next up is a pretty wild idea, sort of, and definitely the least likely out of everything we'll be talking about today of ever actually being made. Sure, the story itself is a pretty simple crossover, and very much me kind of throwing back to a classic Marvel team-up kind of story. And really, it's not all that different from what we might get out of a Shazam crossover, but the reason why it feels so unlikely is because of Sony. This studio seems determined to fight Marvel at every turn and every opportunity, so I'm not so convinced we're going to get a ton of crossovers with Spider-Man characters anytime soon in the MCU. Still, we're here to explore what could be done rather than what will be done. Thor and Spider-Man have crossed over plenty of times in comic book history, but have hardly interacted at all in the MCU on any level, so this movie would seek to rectify that. These characters are very fun together in the books, to such an extent that if it could be translated into movie form, you don't really need a lot of story to back it up. In the comics, they have a fun dynamic, but because they also share an inner depth, they tend to recognize and respect that in one another. This would be the focus of the movie, them discovering the hidden depth in each other and learning to work together. As such, any old villain would do as a force of opposition, and I wound up almost at random settling on the Lizard. With this villain's most basic story already explored in film form, I think it would be really fun to just stick these three characters in a swamp somewhere, and just have the rest of the movie be our heroes navigating the rough terrain while hunting down the Lizard. For Spider-Man, this would be a brisk change of pace and setting, his ability to quickly move across terrain like in a city hampered by the nature of marshland. And for Thor, this all feels like a great way to bring that character right back down to earth. Yeah, he's overpowered for a story like this. That's actually part of the fun and challenge in writing something like it. It doesn't mean it can't be done with even just a little bit of creativity. A tiny little bit of magic power for the Lizard, and suddenly he can stand up to Thor. But like I said, the conflict against the Lizard really isn't the focus of this story. Thor and Spider-Man have had a rushed character development in the MCU to fit the needs of the Avengers movies or their big solo adventures. So giving their characters a little bit of time and space to not only breathe, but get to know each other and deal with everything that's happened to them thus far, it all feels very welcome and long overdue. Fighting the Lizard in a swamp may not be the most complicated or glamorous idea, but it's simple and feels like a relief when the last several stories featuring these two have been so over the top and large in scale. Let's bring it back down to earth. It feels especially overdue for Thor. Let's really examine what things are like for him now that he's a father, and for Spider-Man to be this unknown and untrusted hero to the outside world. And if we really truly need to make things better and have these big crossovers, you can always just set the swamp in New Orleans and introduce us to Brother Voodoo, or hell, depending on where we are in the future MCU timeline, maybe even Gambit shows up. The sky is kind of the limit when it comes to this kind of content these days. The only thing really stopping any of this from becoming a reality is, once again, Sony, the worst villain in Spider-Man history. Number 6. Thor and Hawkeye with Yelena Bolonov and Kate Bishop. While not all of my ideas are crossovers, I promise, it should be noted that after so many movies focused entirely on Thor and only Thor, including one that really should have been more about Jane Foster, it is long past time a certain someone starts sharing the spotlight a little bit more. Shifting that focus to others, his daughter included, lets Thor's character be more externally focused in his conflict as opposed to internal. Because he's had this internal conflict of self-discovery for like 7 movies now, it makes this character feel like he's in kind of a rut, and it really need to get past that a little bit. So it's not something I shied away from in making this video. I think Thor kind of needs crossovers going forward and weirder concepts, which actually left me more excited and feeling as though there was the most potential for future substance with this character, even if on the surface, these ideas might seem like superficial crossovers. So yes, we have a rather straightforward crossover, taking some of the ideas and characters from the Hawkeye show and mashing them together with the Thor stuff. But there is some intention to all of this. Just like with Spider-Man and Shang-Chi crossovers, this works to really bring Thor quite literally back to Earth. Sure, space and all the weird dimensions associated with it has been fun, but it would be very nice for Thor to kind of come back down to Earth and have a more grounded story. Tethering him to Hawkeye feels like an easy way to do just that. These two go all the way back to the very first Thor movie, and are two of only a few remaining among the original Avengers, so it makes sense they would maybe want to connect a little bit more than they already have. I could see a lot of fun in Thor reaching out to Hawkeye with this specific thought in mind. Better yet, these days Clint Barton is basically a package deal. With him you can easily bring along Kate Bishop and Yelena Bolova, who are easily fun additions to any story. Seeing these characters all getting to meet love and dealing with parent Thor could be really cool, and it feels like Clint Barton especially could offer Thor some very valuable dad advice along the way. That sounds like some very wholesome and heartwarming stuff to me. As for a story, I look towards Black Widow's unused lore, and my personal choice for a potential villain in this movie is Molat Boga, the Hammer of God. Sure, as he exists in the comics, he wouldn't be much of a threat to Thor, but it wouldn't take a lot to change that while preserving the cool visual aspects of this character that make him feel so powerful and dangerous. He's literally called the Hammer of God. I think there's a lot we could do with that. There's a way to do this story not well, but expertly. Whether or not Marvel is capable of such a thing these days is another matter, but in the right hands, and assuming everything is being done right, this feels like it has so much potential. Number 5, Thor X. Yeah, it was basically impossible for me not to include or talk about mutants somewhere in this video. With all signs clearly showing X-Men are along the way and very much going to be a presence in the MCU, it feels natural that somewhere we ought to talk about how that might affect a Thor story down the road. However, I do feel that Thor showing up on Westchester or some island full of mutants is a very easy way for things to get overwhelming too fast. It feels like the exact sort of thing that could get us into another situation like Love and Thunder. Thor, or really any Avenger interacting with the X-Men, is a really big deal that deserves a lot of attention and moments to give it justice and weight and some build-up. Thor has a lot of potential with characters like Wolverine, Magneto, Jean Grey, and so many others. So I don't particularly feel the need to rush into any of that with one movie. Rather than going for yet another top-shelf crossover with some major character and trying to introduce too much X-Men content too quickly, I'm going to take a page from the MCU at its best and do these things a little more slowly, methodically, and in increments. This way we can learn about his opinions of them and how he relates to this new faction without a lot of audience expectations getting in the way. Thor is already a big name, and you could use him to get people more familiar with a cool but obscure mutant. I picked Sage for a few reasons. One, her powers and skills make her much more of a tactician, strategist, and commander rather than a frontline superhero. That to me instantly makes her a very unique kind of partner compared to the average superhero Thor has teamed up with in the past, or for other ideas on this list. Sage and this idea can work well at any point or in any context within the MCU. If this movie were made today, Sage's status as a mutant could be an interesting tease of things to come, but nothing more. Yet if it's made 10 years from now, it can be done from the perspective of a much more established mutant race, with Thor kind of on the outside slowly working his way in. Either way, it can be a great way to explore how an Avenger relates to the mutants, and even showing one helping them out a little bit, all while serving as a nice introductory story of bigger content in the future. Having Thor, Love, and Sage rescuing some mutant kids from some force of injustice like the Purifiers or Mr. Sinister is simple enough to carry a film on its own, and as comic book fans, we really don't need to ask for much more as long as the story is made well. Something like that also sets up a nice ending where Thor can either meet some of the X-Men in a way that will only build up more meaning when he encounters, say, an entire team of the characters in the future, or even just setting up a little dramatic irony, with Thor having a more positive experience with an X-Men early on, maybe making him a little bit reluctant if the Avengers ever come in conflict with the X-Men down the road, for example. There's a lot that can be done here, and I think it really starts with Sage. Number 4. Thor and the Guardians, Rise of the Shi'ar. Hey, were you, like me, annoyed when we were basically promised Thor joining the Guardians of the Galaxy and that idea was effectively abandoned within the first 20 minutes or so of Love and Thunder? Good, because that's basically the whole point of this entry. With the future of Thor uncertain, and it appears that James Gunn's time with the Guardians will likely come to an end with Guardians 3, it is my hope that one day we actually get what we were promised in Avengers Endgame, and Thor gets to join with the Guardians proper for a full movie. And I think given that the Guardians are well established along with Thor, it would be a lot of fun to use it as an excuse to introduce us to the Shi'ar Empire. While most entries in this top 10 are designed to ground Thor's character a little bit and bring him back towards Earth more, that's simply not how things are going to be done if he's working with the Guardians of the Galaxy. If we're going to get into this big space stuff, we might as well go big with it. And we might as well go with one of the biggest factions in space we haven't met yet through the MCU, and that's the Shi'ar. There's a lot to them that could be explored, most prominently the Royal Guard, and a movie like this could also be a fun way to bring in the Brood too. Between all that and all that amazing potential, along with the ties the Shi'ar naturally bring to the X-Men, it would be very easy to make a cool movie out of all this content here. Not only does it have a lot of potential in terms of world building for the MCU, and like my previous pitch, this is very much a potential setup for future X-Men content, it also could just be a great Thor story. Thor's character could still go through a grounding period at the hands of the Guardians, who've all had a hand in parenting the younger Groot, and could legitimately help Thor do the same thing with Love. Like with Hawkeye, I think it really sets up a lot of potential character work that could be very interesting for Thor and the Guardians of the Galaxy, all while delivering on a promise that was effectively broken by Thor's last movie. Number 3. Thor in Hell. Thor Ragnarok had a fun opening, but it sure would be interesting to actually explore Thor in a hell dimension for an entire movie. It could have great comic book features such as Mephisto or Blackheart serving as the main villain, while any number of Ghost Rider characters would be available to have either a solid cameo or even a full-fledged supporting role in the story. And something like this feels like it kind of writes itself. Thor getting stuck in a hell dimension and having to escape is a very easy scenario for me to envision. As for Love, she can either be separated from Thor, giving him a strong motivation to return home, or just hang around kicking demon butt the entire time. And then we get into all the possibilities from a visual standpoint. A creative director could make a hell dimension look very interesting, and a good demonic villain could be a very interesting challenge for Thor. Maybe the solution to escaping hell lies not in overpowering an enemy like Mephisto, who might very well be impossible to overpower in a dimension like this, but rather the only way out is by bargaining with him. Given all the cool things that could be done with demons, Ghost Riders, and other hell-themed content and characters from the Marvel Universe, I just can't help but be most excited by ideas like this. In the right hands, Thor in Hell could be a wild ride, but also a step towards the more epic and grander tone that Thor comics have taken in the past. Doing so could make something powerful that actually sticks with people. Balanced with the occasional bit of action or comedy, an idea like this could go a very long way into making the best Thor movie yet. Number 2. Thor Busters. Thor Busters, as I have termed it, is meant to focus a little more on Thor himself and the dynamics around New Asgard being on Earth in more detail. Everything with them has been all fun and games on this front, at least so far. Thor is treated like a superhero, seemingly not held to the same standards as other heroes in terms of facing past legislation like the Superhero Registration Act, and the Asgardians, up until now, have largely been viewed as little more than a tourist attraction, at least from what we've seen. This movie would challenge these assumptions a little bit. Maybe Earth tolerated such things like the Asgardians settling here in the past, but as the stress of a post-Thanos world in the MCU begins to grow, along with increasingly strange events the world is struggling to keep up with, people might be becoming less friendly towards the ideas of Asgardians and superheroes in general. This movie would focus on that growing tension, which is brought to a crisis level when a faction, be it American or another nation, perhaps even a Thunderbolts-adjacent group, develops a set of Thorbuster suits. Suits designed, perhaps using stolen Stark plans or something like that, to withstand and even challenge in combat the power of Thor. Things from here could get pretty dark. While I wouldn't want this experience to be miserable or depressing, this movie would have the potential to feature Thor in a more dark and serious tone than people have ever experienced with him. I think it would be really cool to push Thor as a character a little bit. He's spent so much time in the movies discovering himself, he should have plenty of self-confidence and sense of purpose. Maybe this time it's less about Thor's feelings, and more about how the human race interacts with him and his people. Thor might suddenly find Earth not all that welcoming, in spite of the fact that he has put his life on the line defending it so many times. And with a daughter to raise, this might bring up serious questions about how safe it is for them, or the other Asgardians, to remain on Earth, or even ever visit again. There's a lot of interesting stuff that could be done with this, especially after our introduction to the realm of other gods and deities in the last movie. Maybe Hercules or Moon Knight, depending on what Marvel has planned for these characters, could get involved, pushing events to a breaking point even further as people on Earth start to outright panic over the notion of other gods and powerful beings starting to populate and colonize the planet. Number 1. AIM and the Scientist Supreme. My final idea, I feel, could be a lot of fun for the Marvel community. Unlike everything else on this list, the focus here is very much on a more villainous faction at the center of the story, and also is designed to sort of open up a whole new world of content for the MCU, which is always pretty fun. My idea is that in the MCU, AIM will initially form and flourish out of sheer worship for Tony Stark and the other Avengers. AIM bases its whole organization around the concept that Tony in particular took on the mantle of Scientist Supreme by using technology to protect the world and also restore life to half the universe. And so the organization begins searching for his replacement. From there, AIM begins to splinter and fraction, all while each cell of the organization begins recruiting more and more followers and assets, leading to a sprawling, massive organization of different motivations and behaviors, just like in the comics. Though initially viewed as silly by the outside world, especially with their outfits, societal troubles that have spun out of Thanos' actions on Earth push people more and more towards AIM, which takes advantage of the imagery and heroism of the Avengers to offer people the chance, possibly a false one, of really making a difference and getting their own superpowers. And then at this point, we could pretty much involve any number of characters, and that can take many forms. Some in AIM might either flock to or outright target former associates of Tony Stark, like Pepper Potts or other Avengers. Bruce Banner, more than anyone, seems like he would be a major person of interest for AIM, since the organization would view his knowledge and use of the Infinity Gauntlet as evidence he could be the new Scientist Supreme. And it would likely be Bruce being in danger that could compel Thor's involvement too. While a story like this could very easily overlook Thor, I think he could play a very special role in this story. Not only does he know a great deal more about the world, science, and technology more than the character ever really lets on, he's also the only original Avenger whose powers aren't derived entirely from human-made technology. In the eyes of an organization like AIM, his opinions would matter a lot to certain people who would respect his status as an original Avenger, and not a lot to others who view his powers as more mystical in nature. This movie feels like it could do a lot of big things in very fun ways, involving lots of established characters all focused around a single goal, like your average heist movie or even Captain America: Civil War. Spider-Man, Ironheart, the Fantastic Four, certain X-Men, and Doctor Doom all come to mind as solid contenders for getting involved in the contest for becoming the next Scientist Supreme. Amadeus Cho could also play a big part in this, which in turn could lead to him being accompanied by Hercules. I think a lot of characters would actually help the idea of this story being this sort of chaotic scramble for new power. You want it to have a feeling and sense of scale and unpredictability to it, and one way that you can really accomplish that is by having a lot of different superheroes showing up doing different things. AIM feels like a seriously tantalizing prospect for both heroes and villains, with real resources to make a difference and real danger to harm individuals if people like Doctor Doom are able to seize it unchecked. The comics certainly have plenty of examples of that, but they also show AIM sometimes being a genuine force of good, like when Jonathan Hickman wrote them in his Avengers comics. That potential for the outcome to go one way or another sounds like really good stakes to me. All the while, Thor and the others could find themselves right in the middle of this, facing off against one wacky mad science project after another as they try and track down AIM's leadership. Maybe we fight another version of Ultron along the way, maybe a couple of other interesting characters like some sort of Vision clone, or Wonder Man, all culminating in an introduction to the one, the only, MODOK, who would serve as the final threat for this movie's ending, and could be a bit of big, bombastic, bit of nonsensical superhero fun to end the whole thing. If handled right, this could be one of the best and most fun MCU projects to date. MODOK feels almost overdue for the MCU, and I think Thor might be a great way to introduce him. It is worth noting at this point that this isn't a top 10, strictly speaking. I came up with 10 ideas I really liked, and then ranked them in the order from the ones I was least excited to most excited about, but I'm also quite confident in my ability to come up with any number of additional ideas for this. So if you guys want more pitches or more pitches for other superhero franchises, by all means let me know, because these are really fun to do, and there isn't really a limit to how many of them I can do, I don't feel, because the world of Marvel is so vast and broad and historical. There's always content we can pull from and new ideas we can introduce. So yeah, thanks for watching everybody, and let me know what kind of content you want along these lines going forward, because it was a lot of fun doing this. And if you didn't like it, let me know too, I guess. But I appreciate you watching through all the way, just the same. So that's about it for now, and we'll see you guys next time on Comic Island.